Divine Diva of the Boujee Diva podcast. Look, this episode is not going to just be a message, it will be spell breaking, a recalibration, and a return because we are not just talking about sisterhood, we are talking about a system that made you forget that sisterhood was your birthright. And so, one thing you get to remember is that you were never ever meant to do any of this alone. What happens when women gather is sacred, which is why the world tried so hard to stop it. You were never, I'm going to say it again, never meant to do this alone. Not healing, not rising, not remembering, and definitely not leading. But generation after generation after generation after generation after generation, you were taught that isolation was a strength and independence was safety, that asking for support was a weakness. But this is not true. It's trauma, and it was installed on purpose. There is a long war on women gathering. Let's talk about it. So, there is a deliberate, global, and historical attack on women's connections with each other and to source because it was a spiritual warfare. What do? They burned the witches, women who gathered in circles, held plants in their hand, said prayers, knew the mysteries. They turned Mary Magdalene, who we know is a divine, feminine goddess, right? They turned a priestess of sacred feminine into a hooker to erase her divinity and minimize her power beside Yeshua. They made covens evil and demonic, while men gathering in mass in churches, parliaments, and secret societies is holy. They silenced the voices of women. You can see this today in Afghanistan, where the Taliban literally has banned women's names from being spoken in public and forbade them from gathering, singing, and even going to school. And society has demonized creation power because once men split from feminine energy, once the masculine energy was split from feminine energy, they lost access to source creation. So the only way to create is to control the creator, and women are creators. Let that land. The only way to control creation is to control the creators. And how do you do that? By trying to control women. They disconnected themselves from source, from oneness. So they could no longer create through connection, and they create through control. If you don't think that shaped your life, take a step back, close your eyes, and think again. Think about every time you hesitate to ask for help, every time you shrink around another powerful woman, every time you say, "Oh, I'll figure it out myself," even when you know you're tired. This is the residue of global generational manipulation. You see, separation was the strategy, but connection is the cure. The Matrix did not divide masculine and feminine energy for it to be more powerful. They did it to turn feminine against feminine, womb against womb, leader against leader. They say, she's your competition. Don't trust her. There's only room for one. Never share her. If she shines, it's taking it away from you. But the truth is that together is always more powerful than separate. Unity is a portal, and when women gather, the world shifts. The planet adjusts. And this is why society works so hard to keep us apart, because if you want to keep people in debt, you want to keep people sad and angry and hating their lives, then you can't have them remember who they truly are, because when you're together, you remember and you rise. I always think about when I was, taught in school that I had to work twice as hard, three times as hard, 100% harder than the next person next to me because they have some kind of privilege and blah, blah, blah. I was also taught that women, other women, were the enemy. If she wins, you lose. And so, what happens when you start another business and it really is based on your connections with each other? You go and you get into this industry, and anyone you see who's doing well, it's like, oh, if I'm working with that person, that's great, but I don't want anyone to know, because if people know, then they're going to go to her instead of me. Because it's a very lack-based system. It's a system that if she has, I don't. If I have, she doesn't. Where we all know it's not one person in a bakery and we all have to take the one pie. We all have our own bakeries. We can bake as many pies, as many cakes, as many breads, and as many diverse type of delicious things we want to bake. We can do it on our own, and we have our own. And then when we bake them together, here I have some sugar. You want some sugar? I have some sugar, and then you can have some dough, and you can have some, some flour. Let's work together. Then what? Our bakeries are thriving. And I also want you to hear this. It's such a lie, because if you look at very wealthy people in this society, they all work together. They have, they have their own societies, they have their own meetings, they have their own masterminds. They get together in groups. They information share, they job share, they give and they share amongst each other. Yet, if you're watching movies and television and media with a closed eye, not really looking at it through, if you're looking at it through the veil, all you see is the rich are bad, and they take, and you got to stay away from them. And then you see, don't, if somebody gives you something, give it back, because you need to do it on your own. Because if you take anything or receive anything from anyone, it's because you aren't good enough. Think about, watch it. Once you hear this podcast episode, you will not be able to unhear it. Think about all the times. I think about so many shows. Okay, what's that show? There's this show where there's these kids, and there's the pogues. So there's the rich people, and then there's the pogues who are, on the other side of the tracks or whatever, or on the other side of the marsh or whatever. And so there was one scene I remember that the guy was being given something. Right here, you can have this, and of course, there's nefarious reasons behind why they're giving it to you, of course, right? Because they write that into the movie, and then they're like, no, I will not take it, because I'm gonna do this on my own. And they build it up, and they give you the song and the music, and it's like dun dun dun. And so it's all to break this in your head. One, rich people are bad, so it separates you from wealth, right? I'm not saying every rich person is good. They're not. There's people that have nefarious, plans, wealthy and not wealthy. But what I'm saying is, it's to condition you to separate yourself from wealth, because thinking that when you have wealth, it's a bad thing. But also separating you from community and giving to each other, because I need to figure it out myself. If they give it to me and I didn't do it independently, then can I even keep it? Basically. But the truth is, when I realized that connection was so much more important, that's when I had no problem sharing other mentors. If someone is meant to work with me, they will work with me. And people work across multiple, like they work with multiple different people all at the same time, because we all have different gifts and we all have different ways of expressing. So the idea that you can't share someone else's work, or you can't be in this person's container or let anyone know, because they're going to think that, instead of working with me, they'll just work with the person that I work with, because they'll get all of the knowledge, is just so ridiculous. But it's another way that we've been conditioned to separate ourselves and to work harder and to, use our pain and our separation and suffering and all of that stuff as capital, because they're feeding off that energy, the negativity. It feeds the system. There's reasons why you carried it alone until now. You were the one in your line who could carry this knowing. You were the one with the strength enough to walk through the illusion and the solitude until remembrance returned, right? So you did it alone, but it was until it was time for you never to have to do it alone again. You're not wrong that you didn't trust people, right? In the world where betrayal was a rite of passage, where it's like every woman's gonna betray you, she's gonna want your man, she's gonna want this, right? We were taught that, so of course that felt true, but I'm here to tell you it's not true. It doesn't need to be the strongest story for you anymore. You don't need to carry it anymore. You don't need to shrink to stay safe. This is really why I created La Lumière, the Divine Diva Circle, because it's a circle that can't be broken. It's a sacred circle of return where you remember how to receive without earning it, where you get to be witnessed in your joy, not your pain. Of course, we're going to hold you when you're having difficulty or you have things going on, of course, but you get to first and foremost be witnessed in your joy, where you don't have to like hold power together or shrink or manage or prove. This is where you dissolve trauma through laughter, through sound, through frequency, and joy becomes your baseline. I created La Lumière to be a frequency field that returns what was stolen from you so that you hold your birthright. And where your light doesn't blind others, it calls them forward. Where you get to be too much, quote unquote, but that means you're being enough, you're being yourself. You're here listening to this because your body has been whispering, I'm not here to do this alone. I am ready to be surrounded by women that support me and love me and love themselves and love their missions. So let this be your sign that your remembering was real, the ache was real, and the return home is happening. And so if this episode cracked something within you, screenshot it and tag me at i.m.thealignedsoul on Instagram and tell me what cracked you open. And let your sisters know that you are safe, you are held, you are home, and invite them to listen to this podcast. Give it a 5-star rating. And since you are ready to be inside this frequency all the time, join La Lumière. The circle is lit. The return has begun. And so keep it bougie, stay healed, and be divine, Diva.